A big part of what's missing in most people's careers up until, this sort of point is passion. The so-called security of employment is a myth. It's all right to, acknowledge the lows as well. Like, we're not perfect.
Hello, everyone. We are in season 2 of the What You're About podcast with me, Chad Abood. And this season is a cool one because we've got a beautiful collaboration with the Good Lawyer podcast. And we're doing this collaboration because the future of law for lawyers, I deeply believe, needs to feel like it's more intentionally designed, that there's more choice that benefits the lawyers and it benefits the companies that they support. And I feel like for a very long time, and definitely in the beginning of my career, there were very limited paths to feel entrepreneurial or to practice law in the way that made the most sense for you. And I think, it's a big mission of mine to allow lawyers to have the knowledge and the tools to build a life and career that's very meaningful for them. And for Good Lawyer, this is their purpose, which is to allow talented lawyers to have access to incredible companies that need fractional legal talent. And I just believe that serves everyone. It serves the companies, it serves the lawyers. And so it's a really nice overlap mission. And, as I've talked about before, I'm going to be co-hosting the Future of Law Summit on November 21 with Good Lawyer, Pauline Chen, my co-host. It's going to be incredible. And we're going to have just some of the best speakers from LinkedIn, from the legal industry. And today, we have one of those speakers, Sarah Irwin. And I'm just so glad, my friend, that you're here because the last 6 months has just been such an incredible ride for you. And we think about you were a SaaS GC, you're a tech GC, you built ITGC, the Irish Tech General Counsel community. And also, I really want to get into the venture partner, the angel investor. You've built so much around your brand, connecting B2B opportunities. And it's happened, I know you've put in a ton of work, but it's actually happened in a fairly quick period of time because of the work that you've put in. And I think one of the reasons, at least for my money, why you've been so successful is if you read Sarah's posts on LinkedIn, I think she's one of the most thoughtful, inspiring, and funny people out there. And I think that's that human connection that you built that just really allows people to feel like they know you. And so I can't wait for you to be a speaker at the summit. So glad that we have you here. And we are going to dive into everything Sarah Irwin's intentionally designed career and life, what you didn't know, what you found out, what you're still planning to build. So thank you, my friend, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be part of this. And I can't wait for the conference in November as well, which is going to fly in, even though it's July. It will.
I know. We are recording this. Yeah, so we're recording this in July. And it's funny because the last time you and I spoke actually was pretty much 6 months ago.
Yes.
You were just about to launch your business and you had already built a really big LinkedIn brand. And you had announced that you were going to build your own thing. You had talked about how you were going to help tech companies that were kind of in the growth mode, think about legal, think about growth, think about financing. Yeah. And the last 6 months has been such a whirlwind. And you wrote a post this morning, actually reflecting on the things that you were worried about.
Yeah.
The misconceptions that you had, some of the wins, and kind of how you feel about it 180 days on. And I just thought that was such coincidental timing because the last time we spoke was probably 180 days ago. Yeah. And so I'm very curious to ask you all things about that post. But I wanted to start with 6 months ago, if you can think back to that last call that we had, what was the thing you felt most scared about that 180 days forward, you feel like that wasn't the thing I should have been so afraid of in taking this big leap?
Yeah, I think I was most scared about emulating all of the people that I've seen, like you, like, a lot of the other folks in our wonderful community, like emulating that similar success in the sense of like really owning my own thing and doing my own thing and being true to myself. Yeah, I think that kind of scared me the most. I didn't know what that path was because it's so unique for everyone because we're all unique, right? Yeah, and anyway, you and I had a great chat, and you gave me a ton of advice, and it was so funny because I spoke to you before, literally 180 days ago, and then off I went down my own little path, just listening to people's pain points in my community, in with the sponsors and vendors that I work with, and listening and trying to service the demand that was there for kind of solutions to those pain points. And that was really what guided me to where I am today. But I have to say, in January, I've pivoted enough in my career to know if I really go for something and the fundamental ducks are in a row, that it's probably going to be all right,
Mm-hmm.
and, hopefully not going to die or anything. So, you can just pivot again. But yeah, I knew that there were the components of something really exciting. I was just so scared that I wouldn't be able, like I said, to sort of emulate people that have done something similar, who at that point were at the cutting edge of the future of law, if that may even make sense, and then wanting to be there with them. And I think hopefully I am now. And I think I did a post on this very recently too. Where I am now and where I started off in terms of the value I thought I would be bringing to the table is, they're not the same thing. I thought that there would be more demand from founders of startups and scale ups for more sort of fractional advice from me, as a more sort of board level strategic senior person. But actually I forgot about all the misconceptions about lawyers and the strategic value we really can bring to the table. But that's okay, that's fine. I know, all right, if that's not where the demand is, I'm not going to try and sell something that no one is asking for. I think that's a lot of the reason why so many startups fail, by the way. So I pursued where the demand was, and the demand was, the pain points that people were having in these sort of the two main groups of folks that, wanted me to help them grow their businesses. So in-house lawyers and legal operations and legal tech vendors and law firms.
Yeah, I think you've tapped into something that is really difficult for a lot of A-type lawyers to make peace with, which is you've been trained in a specific skill set, and you can do it well, and you personally know the value. But because of variables that are not always within our control, who's in our network, the time, how we're talking about what we do, where the folks in our community are in their stage of growth, that overlap might not be perfect. And that can be very scary and frustrating because we were trained, do legal work equals value.
Yeah.
And if we're not doing that thing on its own all of the time, then what?
Yeah.
And I think what you've tapped into is being curious about, I am open to helping in a variety of ways. How do people need help that are in my community at this stage that are connected to me? And then realizing you have so much more in your toolkit to offer. How quickly did you start coming to that place versus the resistance of, I thought it was going to be this thing and it's not working perfectly the way that I thought? Like, how quickly were you able to change your mind on that?
Very quickly. I don't like pushing against a closed door, and I don't like, I'd never pursue a career or try and pay the bills by doing something that people are literally like, thanks, but no thanks, So it just made sense to me to just keep going. Okay, so fine, see you later. I'm a locomotive. If you're not interested, fine. Next. Kind of like dating or whatever, just like if someone's telling you they don't see your gifts and value, move on. Yeah, and I didn't find that difficult. I've had a very non-linear legal career that I'm proud of. I've had 3 different careers. In fact, I was a barrister first in England, and then a corporate lawyer in private practice in Ireland, and then a GC at a tech company. And I think it's just in my nature pivoting is just in my nature, and I've used the word ikigai so many times since January, right? And I truly believe that a big part of what's missing in most people's careers up until this sort of point is passion, right?
Mhm.
So they're doing something that there's a market need for, that, maybe they kind of like, and that people want their help for and will pay for, but the passion piece is missing. And so I cannot be passionate about doing work for someone that they sort of shrug and don't really see the value. I just can't do that. So if that component isn't there, then I'll just move on and try and find something where it absolutely is. Yeah, and I've been, all of those conversations and through business development and marketing and discovery calls, usually what happens with the clients that I take on, or the people that I'm helping, the passion is there in them as well, and it kind of, I end up mirroring that. And you just know when you're on, you just hone an instinct for knowing when you're on the right track with what you should be doing and where you should be giving your gifts.
Okay, so here's something. If I'm listening to this and I think like, oh, I read Sarah's stuff and she's doing all this stuff and she's all the way here and I'm all the way back here and I wish one day I could do it. The question I'd have in my mind is, yes, you were confident that you could pivot and succeed when you started your own business and it wasn't going the exact way you had envisioned, but you had talked about starting out as a barrister in
Yeah.
another country and then moving back to Ireland and then being in private practice. And like there was lots of moments where you were changing.
Yeah.
And so take us back to where you started building the muscle. Like, was it going to England as a kid? Were you always very confident in the ability to pivot? Did you learn it through an experience? Because if I'm someone listening to this, I want to tap into my own life experience of being like, yes, I have done that before. Like, when was it for you so that you could build that confidence?
Yeah, but you know what? That's possibly a really good point. I was used to, my family moved from Ireland to England in the 80s. We used to come back to Ireland, in the summer and Christmas and stuff like that. I was used to traveling. So I was used to, I didn't sort of wasn't born in the same country, grew up in the same place. Not that that is always without its own problems, but I saw my parents adjusting, assimilating to a different culture and way of doing things. Yeah, it's possible that I definitely had built a sort of a confidence to fit in and survive and just get on with it and adapt as needed. Um, in my own sort of unique way. Yeah, for sure. And then there were things that were purely a matter of skill set and what I enjoyed doing. I remember before I decided to become a barrister, for example, I didn't actually want to go into a law firm and be a solicitor because I liked talking and I wanted to do advocacy in court. I didn't want to spend the first few years of my career photocopying or some other sort of cliche of what junior lawyers in law firms do. I
Right.
wanted to actually speak in court. And of course, in the US, it's very different because attorneys do the litigating and themselves, in court, but it's very distinct in England
Mhm.
and Ireland. So that was purely skill set driven, perhaps also the confidence to be able to stand up and take abuse from a judge and like make my case anyway, all of those different things. But I guess I was true to myself. I knew what the majority were doing. I knew most people were getting training contracts and being employed by a law firm, and that there was a very clear path ahead of them. And I knew I didn't want to do that, so I didn't.
I guess like, if I'm trying to take this away, if I'm trying to build my own version, listening to this, maybe I'm going back to like not just the professional experiences, but even the life experiences I've had to know that I can survive, I can pivot, I can thrive. I have skills beyond purely legal technician skills that have been drilled into me, which are great. And you work hard to get them and you can monetize them. And that's beautiful. But there are lots of ways to use these skills. And,
Yeah.
you're a great example of that. And I think where sometimes we struggle to, maybe me too, how I also struggle to convey the path is it didn't always look like this. There's like lots of baby steps along the way where I was forced to pivot. I chose to pivot there. I followed energy. And I think it's the reflection on those times, the moving from Ireland to England, learning a different way of doing things, a different style, a different culture. How do you adapt? How do you be someone who's not from there and then fit in, then to go back? And you can actually create a lot of confidence in yourself to be like, wow, I have done all these things. I think about the analogy of climbing the mountain, and
Yeah.
there's some people who are very motivated by like next step, next step, next step. I think that's great. I
Mm.
personally, and I think a lot of other people are also very motivated by the distance traveled.
Mm.
And so you have to look back to the ground, to the base camp, to be like, oh my God, I almost slipped there and I found the grip and I did that. Look how far we've come. And I think your story there, your reflection of your life is like, that's a lot of the foundation
Yeah.
that probably gave you the confidence to be like, try this. I can move here. I can
Yeah,
try
and
this.
you know what? I also did as part of my college degree, I did a year abroad living in France. So it's
Mm.
the Erasmus program in Europe, right? And it's paid for partly funded by the European Union. So I actually then I went on to live for a year in a foreign language. And it turns out, you learn human nature's the same. People speak different, it's all in a different language, but broadly speaking, the essential elements of living, accommodation, food, it's the same everywhere. And that actually gave me a ton of confidence at the right time. I was 19 or 20, whatever that perfect age is, where you're just out of your teens, you haven't really hit your stride in your 20s, college years, basically.
Yeah.
um yeah, so that probably, it was the same experience again, but in a foreign language. So that gives you even more confidence, because you can sort of parlay your way through that competently. And again, it's okay. Everything's fine.
And so
Um,
when you think about it, so you go through these different phases of being a lawyer, and
yeah,
then you're GC at a tech company, company's raising money, there's growth. It's kind of like the top of where the in-house food chain goes. Like, sure, you can always go to bigger and bigger companies, but the
mhm,
top of the food chain is like lots of growth,
yeah,
lots of impact, leadership role, general counsel in
yeah,
an exciting space.
yeah.
How did you feel when you were there? Because you had done a few pivots in your mind during that time where you're like, there's something else that's coming, or in that space where you're like perfectly happy and you foresaw the next 20 years being a GC at tech companies.
Yeah. And just before I answer that, it's funny what you say there, because there is this, even within the in-house community, some people can be a little elitist. Like, they think that maybe being GC of a
Right.
multinational and a massive team is somehow more senior than being first legal hire and GC at a rapid scale tech company. Whereas I actually think that, I don't believe in that sort of mindset anyway. But actually, I had an enormous amount of autonomy. I remember the CEO, I reported to him. I went to board meetings. I was on the leadership team. Like, it couldn't really get much more senior unless he left and I became CEO.
Right.
Um, but it was a wonderfully liberating experience, because it was the first time I'd ever done interviews or been hired by an organization that saw all of my nonlinear experience um, as going to have tremendous impact in this. It was like the perfect storm for me, the sort of chaos of going from scrappy startup to building processes and becoming more sophisticated sellers. And yeah, I love that. And I say that because all of my interviews up to that point, but when I started interviewing at law firms in Ireland, all of my barrister experience was largely discounted, because for the sort of PQE structure, it was impossible to slot that in anywhere. Maybe it would have been easier if I'd gone into litigation, but I wasn't. I sort of I completely changed specialisms. Um, and you know what some law firms can be like, and the bar, in fact, all the interviews I did in London to get into chambers, it's like, oh, you've only got 2 degrees, why don't you have three? Or, oh, you only speak 5 languages, why don't you speak 10? That kind of thing. And then finally I did all the interviews with Times, and they thought I was brilliant. They were like, wow, can't believe you've done all that. So you're a barrister, and that means you've been a barrister, so you sort of, if there's ever a sort of a litigious issue or whatever, you'll be able to deal with that. And you've been a corporate lawyer, so you can handle a funding round. And they just thought I was amazing. And it seems silly, doesn't it, to say that, like, everyone should know that they're amazing. But yeah, it was the perfect sort of startup storm for me. And I really wanted the autonomy to build something of my own from scratch. So I did the legal function. I remember I went to my first leadership team meeting and I thought, what the hell why do they want to, what do they care what I think? Just all of that conditioning that that we go through in life for one reason or another in this elitist profession of ours. Yeah, and the CEO that I reported to would ask me questions about business strategy, and I remember thinking, does he care what I think? I didn't come across that way, of course, but I had to shake all of that off really quickly because I thought this just does not suit me at all. I can't even remember what the question was that I was supposed to answer there.
Well, I was curious. It sounded like the answer was you really loved it when you first started doing it. And a lot of your story resonated with me. It's similar path to a portfolio of tech companies that had gotten all this money and were growing and acquiring, and you're at the leadership table and it's very exciting.
Yes.
When I was doing it, like my time of being like a tech GC was about 3.5 years. And for the first year, maybe I just thought about the growth, integrating the companies, bringing in legal tech, automating process, building the brand. I think maybe for the last 1.5 years or so, my brain started to think like, this is great, but I feel like there's something else that I'm meant to do, even if I'm not sure yet what that thing is going to be. And so I was curious for you, it sounded like such a beautiful fit.
Yeah.
Like the whole time you were there, were you like, this is a beautiful fit? And then one day it just clicked that like, no, it's time to do something else. Or did you start picking up on these different signals? And what were those signals? Like what was pulling you out of this amazing fit?
Yeah, so I was so lucky. I had this I had this CEO that pointed it out to me, right? So he had a great boss when he was at DocuSign that spotted something in him and said to him, you should definitely go off and start Tynes. So he did. And he did that for me. So that I've done all the hard work here, but he was the one that I think probably saved me about 6 months of coming to that conclusion myself and maybe not being that happy. I can't imagine that because I left it for me at the height of the fun. But yeah, he said to me, I can see the reception you get from in-house lawyers everywhere on the planet on LinkedIn through your content. I see the stuff that you come out with. I can see the community you're building, which at the time I was only building to literally connect people for support. Of course, I didn't realize what I was actually doing was laying really solid foundations for an actual business. And he had done that, right? So he was 5 years ahead of me. And because I trusted him, that was our relationship generally. He was a great mentor. We still is. We got on really well. I had total faith that he was probably right, and then the more that I reflected on it, the more I thought, this sort of relaxed compared to sort of law firm life, this sort of startup scale up way of working and the journey, not the destination of, enjoying and congratulating you for building things rather than the final outcome, but only if the bill's paid type thing, getting praise for the journey and the process and all the stuff that you're building was so liberating. And mostly I'd suggest something and people would say, yeah, okay, let's try that. Yeah, you know best. You're the subject matter expert. Let's do it. Sure. And all of these things, I think, unlocked this probably entrepreneurial DNA that I was born with. And I'm starting to realize certain things. Maybe I've never liked being employed. Maybe I was not born to report to anyone. A lot of people on the planet are like that. So it was going really well. I was building ITGC on the side, but I think what the CEO that I was reporting to could see was I wasn't getting, I really needed to go at it full time. And so I actually said to him at one of my performance reviews just before I left, I said, well, how about I go part-time and I could be a fractional GC, or I could just sort of do 2 or 3 days a week. And he said, no, you have to go out this full time. He said, you'll get sucked full time into things that you shouldn't be working on, and that kind of work. And you will naturally let that be your priority, not your own thing. So anyway, it was actually, he did all of that thinking for me.
What an incredible leader.
I know, right? And a feminist that's a bloke. Now he's a self-confessed feminist, but like many leaders would want to selfishly keep someone highly competent even though there was nowhere really for them to go. When I was hired, it was back in the growth at all costs economy. And, he had hired me thinking, oh, well, in 3 years, she'll have a global team of 50 lawyers everywhere, and that didn't materialize. And it's the reason why the company is thriving now, because they didn't continue to grow at all costs. But yeah, I think you could probably see that there wasn't anywhere for me to go really beyond where I was at that point, even though, again, I was sublimely happy. I was, my job, I had ITGC, I had all my little trips to North America. Yeah. And anyway, it turns out he was right.
That's very, very fortunate to have that in a leader. Some people find that in a mentor outside of an organization.
Yeah.
Really fortunate to have someone like that, someone that selfless.
Yeah.
To lead and help manage in a way like that, where it's not about them, it's about people on their team. So that's incredible. I think for a lot of folks listening to this, maybe they're thinking, not sure I'd get that in my org. But what I would say is you can find it in other places. Yeah. And I think one thing that you do extremely well with your brand, and that I think also helps with finding great mentors, is you need to do two things. One is celebrate greatness where you see it. The reason why I think that matters, people get confused here. They think I mean blow smoke up people's, whatever, because it gets you a benefit. No, I mean, if you celebrate the greatness that you think is special and impactful, it actually sends a signal to the world about what you care about. I think that matters. And then the other thing is, also telling people what matters to you in terms of how you like to make impact.
Yeah.
Because people don't always know. Like, they might see Sarah Irwin, like GC of a tech company, the tech company's going great, you seem to be happy, and think like, okay, max happiness, you found max impact, great.
Yeah.
But if you share with people the things that inspire you, how you want to create impact, they can actually unlock for you opportunities that you would not have conjured up on your own or had the belief to do on your own. So if you're listening to Sarah's story and thinking, well, I don't know if my manager would do that for me, what I would advocate for is do something else that Sarah's done really well, which is celebrate greatness where you see it on a space like LinkedIn or in your local community, and tell people how you like to make impact. Because if you do that, people will know where to find you. They will know what you care about. Otherwise, they don't know. All they know is your title and where you work. And they'll just assume that you're happy doing that. And so it actually limits the amount of opportunities that'll come your way. And so, that was something I was thinking about when you were sharing that, was you had a very special circumstance with an amazing manager. Yeah. If you don't happen to have that, there are still other ways to unlock these ideas.
Absolutely.
Did you find that from LinkedIn too? Like, was that a big piece for you?
Definitely. I found in my life, I am the sort of person that will say something that no one else is saying. And then the next thing, 25 people are like, oh, I'm so glad you said that. I think that too. Oh my God, and it's all about finding your tribe, isn't it? Like, shine your light so people can be who you are, so people can find you. It's that whole concept. Yes. What are your values? What impact do you want to have? It doesn't cost any money to do that for free on LinkedIn. And we know that, I'm proof that you can find your tribe and people that, can mentor you that way, for sure. It's funny what you say using that word impact, because in that role at times, there wasn't really anything left for me to do. I built the infrastructure that the team needed. I was leveraging automation, technology, AI, outsourcing, all of these modern ways of running a lean legal function. So, that impact, I sort of done all of that tangibly. And I suppose it's all part of the same thing, isn't it? Like, if I hadn't, I might still be there sort of doing all that stuff. But yeah, if you're not lucky enough to have a really sound, selfless, feminist mentor and manager, you can absolutely find tons of people that will see your gifts and value you through doing that on LinkedIn. Absolutely.
Well, and I think this is a great example of it. Like, I think about even the connection between me, you, Good Lawyer, the Summit. Like, I met Good Lawyer and the Good Lawyer team and Brett Colvin because of LinkedIn. Yeah. And then because of LinkedIn, when I see those folks at events, you connect, you meet. we find ways to work together because everybody's sharing what they're passionate about. Same with me and you. We
Yeah.
don't know each other. We don't live in the same country. We live an ocean away, but we found each other because of LinkedIn. And then because of these opportunities, we can bring everyone together for things like
Yeah.
summits and this podcast. And like you really nicely said, which I really try to remind people is there's lots of ways to find community.
Yep.
Something like LinkedIn or whatever in real life version is better for you. If it's something you can do at your own time, in your own way, in your own voice, at low to no cost.
Yeah.
That ROI is something that is very difficult to find elsewhere.
Yeah.
And I think if you're looking for a really tactical, practical example, like this is it. This is how Sarah and I are connected. This is how Goodler and I are connected. This is how Sarah's speaking at that conference.
Yeah.
And that's beneficial for everyone. And so I think that you're a great example for folks to see, like, how in a very quick amount of time can you create an international community and have your own business? And you did that through LinkedIn.
Yeah. And look, we see a lot of sort of bragging and sort of braggy posts about going from 0 to 1 million revenue overnight and all that kind of thing. But no word of a lie. All of my inbound comes from my organic content. And I don't just mean inbound people that want to pay me money. I mean friends and mentors and peers and all of that. All of those connections have happened because I was just sharing my experience of the pain points I was having at times as a first legal hire GC in rapid scale. I was trying to find members for ITGC, which is a free community. And, and then so much more happened besides that, including growing a business. But you'd actually be amazed at what you think you'll find on there versus what you actually find on there, right? And what you can actually grow. And we're both proof of that, for sure.
I think you're right. And it's what you give is what comes back to you. Like,
Yes.
I talk to a lot of folks, or if I help people start to build a LinkedIn brand, the first thing they'll always say is, your thing seems to be working great for you. I hate things like LinkedIn because it's just garbage, brag posts, job updates. And I keep telling them, it's like, it's because you have to give first.
Yes.
In order for that stuff to be fed back to you. If you give nothing, you will just get garbage. So you have to put in some level of effort. And I think the best level of effort you can put in is just sharing what you care about and celebrating other people. And you don't even have to post to do that. You can just lift other people.
King or queen. Yeah.
That's right.
Totally.
Okay. So you're this incredible GC. You have this incredible manager that's encouraging you to do your own thing. You were saying at the top that you thought it was going to be fractional strategic advice. Maybe there's a legal bent to it, to like founders that are trying to grow, which would be kind of more similar to what you were doing before as a full-time employee. And you thought, well, it makes sense. I can dice this up and offer it in a really strategic way. And clearly I'm great at that. So that's a natural fit. Seems very intuitive. Turns out people wanted different things. And so for folks that are contemplating building something and feel like it's got to be, exactly what they've done before, take us through the curiosity, how you discovered it was going to be different things, not exactly what you thought it was, and what it is now. What are you offering now that actually makes so much sense that you didn't think was going to be possible?
Yeah. So I guess I found my product market fit, and I did that by doing my sort of pre-market research, picking the brains of, people that I thought would be in my ICP, like tech founders. I kind of quickly deduced that a lot of what they would need my help with was probably, there were already businesses doing that, kind of iterating that very early stage legal advice. And it was far too soon for them. They didn't know who I was. It's far too soon for them to necessarily want to offer me a board seat. But I followed a basic structure, but very effective. I did sort of pre-market research with people I knew, then actual market research with people they introduced me to, and just talked to as many people as possible to see where the demand was. I knew that I think part of that made me realize it wouldn't just be one thing, right? So I've got lots of different revenue streams. I'm very diversified. And I love that because it's sort of given me this security early on to be able to experiment gently with other things. But I found my product market fit. I knew that law firms, legal tech vendors, and legal ops companies. I knew that they had already been sponsoring events on an ad hoc basis. And then I thought, I think I'll put a proposal together, which like a proper pitch deck that you would send to an investor asking them for 26 million, you know. I put together a formal proposal for sponsorship packages for operating cash for all of this year. And two of them said yes. And I thought, well, there you go. It just takes one person, and not only one, but it was two. And then from that, you know, I built that from there. I thought, right, well, there's immediate demand there for that. I'll double down on that. And then in sort of nurturing the community and building that kind of thing, I was getting interest from sponsors that were more interested in sponsoring my content on LinkedIn. So I've got a B2B influencer service, and you know, we talk a lot, we know a lot about Instagram influencing, D2C, right? Famous people selling shampoos. But you know what our profession and sort of legal operations and legal tech is like. You need to be a real subject matter expert to be able to, you're almost like a partner to, it's more than marketing, it's partnerships to facilitate, to sort of broker a sale between a technology company that wants to sell into a company that's, you know, someone in my audience or in ITGC. So I naturally love, you know, I love doing my carousels and all my LinkedIn content. I just love it. And the next thing, I was finding demand from sponsors that wanted to team up on one of those, sponsor a set number of posts a month. So I put some structure on that. That was great. And then one-off things like sponsoring white papers, which you can charge more for because it's like you're writing a proper essay, and the distribution, and you know, is much more targeted. And so I thought, well, this is brilliant because I'm able to nerd out on a guide that is on a subject like CLM software that I absolutely adore, and I have firsthand experience of successfully picking one and rolling one out. And I thought, okay, this is brilliant. And then the next thing, you know, I was doing so many of these different things. Then I started to get demand from GCs of in-house legal teams that wanted me to run a kind of a 90-minute workshop for their legal team on, you know, the essential components of being a future fit lawyer in-house and relevant and still having a job, you know, with the onslaught of AI and all these things that you really need to know how to sort of handle and use to stay relevant as an in-house lawyer. So I thought, okay, yeah, sounds like fun too. I'll do that as well. And then I separately, because I was suddenly in this position where I felt so much control over my professional life, I thought I really need to start nurturing my savings and whole pension situation, you know, like classic millennial, and start investing. And, you know, that's another thing that I've never done before because, you know, privileged white men have always made out like there was some massive science and it was this great big mystery because they didn't really want anyone else making a ton of money on the stock market or whatever. So anyway, I started angel investing, and I was also supporting a group of friends of mine who had set up an angel syndicate in Ireland to invest in women-founded businesses here. And then someone reached out to me from a VC firm and asked, was I interested in being a venture partner, which, you know, gave me access to their portfolio of companies. And so all of these different things. And I didn't have to say yes to everything. They each felt like a really good strategic fit. And of course, the one thing they all have in common is me and my, you know, personal brand, like I am the niche, as the saying goes. But yeah, sort of all in that similar kind of ecosystem.
If I pull some of those threads there, like I think something that you're really great at, and I think you've built the muscle over time, is you're very curious and you're very open. And maybe some of those things were given to you by the fact of moving as a young child and, you know, learning a new place. But I think it's like, if I think about your journey, the different things that you've done, the multi-revenue themed business that you have, I think a lot of it is because you don't feel forced, obligated, or that your ego is tied up in doing this one thing that you think that you are supposed to do. I really feel like you're trying to create value with the experience and the skills that you've got, and
Yeah.
you are happy to create that value in the way that your community wants it from you.
Mm.
And I'm a big believer of this. And so when I'm listening to this, I'm like, I love this, because that's how I feel. I
Yeah.
really believe that people can reveal opportunities to you.
Yeah.
And I really do believe, like the part that you said, that you are the niche. I'm
Yeah.
a big believer in that too, because the alternative version is like Sarah Irwin helps 42-year-old GCs go from scale up to a mid-sized company. Like there's this niche down in the description of who you help. I think
Mm.
what you do is you niche down really well on who you are and the
Yeah.
skills you've got. And what you're finding is, whether it's sponsors, whether it's partners, whether it's the influencing piece, whether it's like coaching, mentoring, consulting, all of these people want a version of that for
Yeah.
their own need. And that part just really resonates for me, because I think about that a lot, and I
Yeah.
feel a pressure sometimes to follow the Chad helps 43-year-old, this, do this. And it's like, it just doesn't resonate. What resonates is sharing my message
Yeah.
and supporting opportunities that are very exciting to me, because the mission matters a lot. And
Yeah.
I just really felt that from what you were saying.
Yeah.
Does that land with you?
It does, yeah. And I think it, all the different, doesn't matter what type of work I'm doing, I have to be able to somehow relate it to myself, not in a self-centered way, but I mean, I like giving personal examples when I'm doing a workshop on using AI or legal tech. I like, as that sort of ex GC, ex ICP of a legal tech company, I like being able to involve a bit of my own personal experience with something. Yeah, and maybe that's a big part of the personal brand piece as well. But it's funny. So I think over the last 6 months, my efforts have compounded because I was sharing all this content on LinkedIn before and building community and building that personal brand. So I think there is an element of the sort of hockey stick thing that's happened in the last 6 months as well. And I'm sort of at a place now where I would say, since I started sharing content, almost all of it, 100% of it, was me talking about the pain points that I was going through, or that, other in-house lawyers were. And I'm bringing a bit more of the personal stuff into it now, like that building in public company themes. And people that have been following me for ages probably feel like they're really getting to know me. And that is making the personal brand compound too, I think, right? So it's not
I
like
think that's a big
overly
part of it.
personal and oversharing, but it's part of it too.
I think it's also the differentiator. Like, yes, you are an ex-GC in the tech space and you're the ICP of it. And like, so was I, and so are lots of folks. I think the part that a lot of people resonate with you is that for the folks that also connect with your style,
Yeah.
the journey, the way that you share your reflections upon it, like that's your differentiator, because only you can do that.
Yeah.
Like everybody can only do that in their own unique way, sustainably. And I really do believe that that's the differentiator. And so when you think about like 180 days from now, what are the things that you think you're afraid of now that might not play out 180 days from now? Kind of like, 180 days ago, like what are things on your mind? You're like, I have no idea how that's going to happen, but you suspect it'll probably be okay.
Yeah. I think as a founder, it's like that the music's going to stop and suddenly everyone will be like, we suddenly don't see your value. We're suddenly not going to pay you, which is ridiculous. But, because, you're always trying to, but which is ridiculous because I've built recurring revenue. I'm diversified. That's just not going to happen. If suddenly someone said, we can't stand you, that's it, that business is done, well, I'll just focus on the other ones or find demand somewhere else. But I think that's probably the biggest fear. I built 6 months worth of stuff that I don't want to lose now, whereas I hadn't done, when we spoke 6 months ago, I hadn't built any of this stuff yet. So there was nothing to lose. I was just sort of going for it. Yeah, that's probably the biggest one. But it is, of course, a limiting belief and complete nonsense. So,
and so like all of this makes sense, all of it being true, all of it still a barrier to our own growth. And so for you, even when you are so aware that something is just, like an artificial belief that is like very unlikely to be true, what do you do? Like what works for you to get over that fear?
Acknowledging it. I think a lot of the time we can be in denial about, or we're not comfortable feeling scared or doubtful. And, there's a lot of bravado out there as well, especially around founders and startups. And this is why I think, like my Founder Fridays posts and just building in public and sharing what didn't go well and what did. I think that resonates because I'm actually being honest about it and transparent. Whereas a lot of people, there's a lot of bravado and people don't talk about their deepest fears and what didn't go well in what they're doing. So definitely that weekly journaling really helps, because every Friday I sit down and I think, I've achieved absolutely nothing this week. What have I done? I feel like it's been one big long day. It's just one sort of blurred into the other. And then I sit down and I actually see the data. I write the list and I think, oh my God, it's been incredible. Can't believe I did that, But it definitely helps. The fastest way is to acknowledge it and just get on with it anyway. Just keep going, because what happens is very quickly you realize those thoughts they could strike at any time. They're not necessarily going anywhere, but it just gets easier to let them sit there.
Yes, I really like the piece about getting it out, because if it stays in your mind, it spirals, and typically not in a positive way.
No.
And it like grows in energy that doesn't even make sense. But when you get it into the world and you get your thoughts out of your mouth and you hear them, then you're like, okay, it's a real fear, but doesn't really sound that likely now that I hear it coming out of my own mouth. If someone told it to me, I'd probably be like, that's probably not going to happen. But when it just lives in our mind, it's a lot scarier. So that makes a lot of sense. And I also like how you write on the Fridays, because I think a lot of people can relate to it. Like they see your updates and they're probably like seeing their own by reading yours and being like, I feel like it is the written version of looking back down the mountain and seeing the distance traveled.
Yes.
There's so much fuel in that.
Yeah, for sure. And it's all right to, acknowledge the lows as well. Like we're not perfect. And just sticking with that point about the negative thoughts and the fears and doubts, most of our lives, for whatever reason, I feel like we are brought up to trust our minds or something. And it's only until quite later on in life, once you start seeing a therapist or whatever, that someone actually teaches you our mind likes playing tricks on us. And it will it comes up with all sorts, and you don't have to believe your thoughts is my point, especially if they're horrible negative ones. I don't know what it is in life. We're just maybe encouraged to, it feels like we're mostly encouraged to believe our thoughts or to respect our thoughts, but we're never told you don't have to believe them all. Some of them are quite nasty, actually.
And some of it is like designed to help you, but not applicable to this phase, like designed to help a previous version of you or designed to help humans from a different time. And there's just a lot of deep coding around like fear was very helpful when you have no idea what anything is and anything can kill you. And then when you're in a different phase of life that's a bit more secure, but those thoughts are still there around fear being a safety mechanism. And so I think there's a lot around like almost talking to the fears of being like, hey, appreciate the lookout. I'm going to be all right on this one, but thanks. Because it creates a more objective view. If you were going to do, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that's nice. If that's reassuring for other people, I love that. You know what I mean? If they're starting their day on a Friday feeling like they've had a rubbish week or uninspired, and they see that, I didn't have a great week in some ways either. They're like, oh, okay, sweet. That makes me feel a bit better. And then they go off and get on with their day and feeling a little bit reassured that no one's perfect.
I think it's great that you do it. I think it's great that you consistently do it, because then people can look out for it, especially if it's like very motivating or like empathetic for how they feel. I think it's amazing. If you were going to do a 180-day forecast to the thing that is like, that there's demand for that. Like, is there any kernel of something that you're seeing now that you're like, I wonder if that's going to be an important part of it in 2025?
Yeah, I feel like I'm kind of morphing into some sort of fractional CMO or marketing, some kind of marketing advisory. I even did a mentoring session for some startups recently. None of them are legal tech. Well, one of them is compliance tech. But anyway, all AI-powered startups. And I was talking to them all about the importance of online content and LinkedIn specifically for finding assessing and finding your ICP and your buyers. And because they're all Gen Z, they've grown up with TikTok. They completely got what I was talking about.
Right.
They were like, yeah, this makes complete sense to me. Video content, perfect. And yeah, I think that is going to start becoming a dominant theme as well. Especially now that I've got so much data around my successes with, a lot of marketing is very traditional. It's all go to events in person and, have a newsletter, and they're all fine. But there's nothing more powerful than just picking a subject matter expertise and just sharing generously all of that online. It doesn't have to be LinkedIn. It could be TikTok, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it's shrewd. And I can see that's going to be a theme. I'm starting my sort of video content strategy. I don't know what doors that's going to lead to, but I'm quite excited to find out, that I can feel it when I'm recording them, like, oh, this is exciting. I don't know what this is going to shape up to be, but it feels exciting. You get that sort of, when you're sort of onto something.
Well, you're very good, and I think you've honed this, but through experience. But you're very good at following where you feel energy before you know the result.
Yeah,
which is a very uncomfortable, scary, foreign thing for many folks to do, especially in the legal industry. But I think you've built a muscle around like, this feels right. When I've looked back in my past and I followed things that felt right, it often led to something, maybe not the thing I predicted, but something positive.
Yes.
And so, I can't wait to see your videos. I know they're going to be amazing. I want to.
And actually, on the point of fear, Chad, there's always a bit of fear as well. There's the butterflies, and I know it's a great thing, but there's a bit of fear and frustration because it's new, or I'm trying to figure out whatever tool it is that I'm using, and I can't quite get to grips with the editing, but then I figure it out and I'm just so thrilled. And that's the way that fear can really be harnessed in a good way.
I love that. I want to ask you 3 quick questions, one at a time, and ask for 3 quick answers from you, whatever comes to your mind first. Okay.
Yeah.
Going back to younger Sarah in England, Sarah coming back to Ireland, what is the one thing you would want that Sarah to know about intentionally designing a career that like fits your energy and your talents that you didn't know back then? What would you want to tell her?
I would probably want to say something like, there are more people doing the sort of non-linear thing than you realize, and they're doing something that the majority is doing isn't all it's cracked up to be. So just go for it.
Oh, that would be a good conversation. I would have loved to have been there for that. What do you think she would have said? Okay, so I'm deviating from my plan, but like, what do you think she would have said in response to that? Okay.
If I was talking to someone a bit like that CEO at Times that told me to start my own business, all right, okay. If this is a person that I really trusted and respected saying this to me, and I would 20 years ago, I'd respect me now. If I was talking to Foreman and me, I'd be like, okay, and just go for it.
I love that.
If nothing else, like you said, just the curiosity. I'm like, I'm dying to know how this turns out, so I'm going to go for it.
The curiosity bug is a big one for me too, so I get that. What do you wish folks who are going to listen to this and follow you, see you doing something nonlinear, what is the biggest thing you wish they knew about atypical careers? Some conception they have that you don't think is true now that you've been doing it. What would you want them to know?
That it's easier than everyone makes out. In fact, in some cases, it is easy. If you're just following, being you, and like I said, that ikigai thing, if you can make money from it, if that's what you want to do, if you're passionate about it, someone needs you to do that work and they're prepared to pay you and so on, it's actually quite a straightforward formula. But especially in law, we're conditioned to believe that if we're not doing what the majority is doing, everyone going, to the same law, big law or whatever, that somehow is like, you're going to be cast out in the cold. Well, it's actually, that it's the more straightforward, safe thing to do. I'd love more people to know just how simple it can be building something like I've built in your own way. You don't have to build what I've built. but it's
And maybe
simple.
there's like a definition of like safe that needs to be fleshed out a bit more. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's safe to like feel like you're taking a certain salary every year, but what about the impact, enjoyment, value, fulfillment you're getting from this enormous part of your life? Like,
Yeah.
if you feel like that's not there and will not be there, like,
Yeah.
what does that mean
Well,
for
I
a huge
think,
part of your existence?
I honestly think that the so-called security of employment is a myth, and we know that categorically now with the thousands of rifts happening all the
Mhm.
time. They're still happening all the time. So that there's a myth that, you're sold, oh yeah, join this business for the next 35 years of your life, and you get a steady paycheck and all that kind of thing. That's a myth. I've never
Right.
had more money in my life than I have now, admittedly in my company bank account, but you know what I mean? Like, I've never felt more financially secure, even though that makes no sense to someone that
Right.
loves their regular paycheck. But we need to redefine what security actually means when it comes to
Right.
earning a living.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
That sounds like an amazing post.
yeah,
Um, okay, last one.
yeah.
What is something that you and I haven't talked about before during this conversation that you wish we would have talked about, that you are curious about from my journey and yours overlapping? What is something we haven't talked about that you'd be curious to know?
I don't know. Probably selfishly, just to get your view on how you think I'm doing. As so, you're like future me. So when I spoke to you in January, I think had you just hit the 1 or 2 year mark of doing
One
your
year,
own?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So you're, yeah, just like future me. How am I doing?
I mean, I think the thing that you focused on, I really loved your post today because it actually gave me a lot of context into how you're doing beyond what I read, so there's
Yeah,
the financial piece, which like, I think you're always going to be financially successful because
yeah,
you're smart, you're hardworking, you're curious, you're friendly, people like you. So I was so glad to read how well you're doing, but that was never something when we talked 6 months ago, I was worried about for you. I
yeah,
always knew you were going to make money. The thing that I really love that you've done so well is you have consistently and continually shown up with so much of who you are as a person
mm,
connected to your business. And the reason why I've really loved seeing that is because there's only one you
yeah,
right now. There's only one you that people are thinking about with this like perfect collection of like GC, marketing, influencer,
yeah,
traveling around, doing the events in a funny, like humble, but like curious style. And so for anyone that engages with, they can't think of anyone else. They think of you. And I think that's the asset. That's like the hub of the wheel.
mm,
And so I think that's the most important thing from an outsider's perspective that I think you've built, because I think that asset you can take and do anything with. Just like you were saying, maybe it's a fractional CMO thing. Of course, that makes sense. And so
yeah.
I really love how you've really doubled down into like, I'm going to share it with you. And this is where I'm at. This is what I'm doing. This is what's hard. This is what's great. This is how I see the world. You're like showing your personality, because that is so deeply bonding. That is just human nature 101. And so for me, I think that's the best thing of the many brilliant things you've done in 180 days. That is just, I just love seeing that.
And do you think that's like, is that something you would say to anyone else that wants to build a career at the future of law that's listening to this?
I
Like,
think
heard
if
a lot
you
of
want to
yourself.
build a career for the future of law, and the future of law for you, not the future of law of anyone else's definition, you can
Mm,
be the future of law for you. If you want to be in a firm, if you want to be in house full time, like go for it. I think the future of law for you is, how are you going to bring your specific experience, skills, passion, and energy to the industry, whether inside it, adjacent to it, supporting it, in a way that actually makes you feel like you have more energy after you do the work. This is the signal that I tell folks that I'm coaching is like, okay, so you do a thing. Do you lose energy or do you gain energy? And my practical example is, I can negotiate a SaaS agreement with anyone. I feel like I've done it so many times, thousands and thousands of times. It doesn't give me energy to do it.
hmm
It takes energy from me. And doing legal negotiations and legal structuring has kind of always taken energy from me. This conversation, hosting an event, coaching people, providing advisory services, like I get energy from
Yeah.
it. That's a good signal for me. And so for people trying to build their future of law, what gives you more energy after you've done the work?
And
That
just
would be my
follow
question.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's like
Love that.
you've basically touched on that the entire time of like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, they want that. Oh, I like that. Oh, I don't want to do that. So I'm going to move away from that. I'm going to double down on this because I love this. I think that's exactly what you've done.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Well, thank you, my friend. Thank you for
Yeah.
your time. Thank you for
Too.
joining us. Thank you for sharing your experience. And, I know there's so many folks that are watching you and, only a small fraction are engaging compared to the folks that are reading, absorbing, and wondering. And so what I would say is if you listen to this, you watch this, and, you're hearing Sarah's journey and you're curious more about it, like go to her LinkedIn profile, engage with her content, find out how you can connect with her, work with her, because, everything that she shared today is just, it's so powerful to help businesses grow in this next phase with technology and building a brand. And you're an inspiration, my friend. So thank you so much for sharing your time.
Thank you, Chad. Loved it. Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you. And thank you everyone for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.